Welcome to the good stuff. Today, we are going to be talking about choosing the best fit K-12 school for your child. I know when I was in school and I was young, you just started at the one in your neighborhood and followed through and didn't think much about it. Since then, the offerings in the K-12 space and really TK-12, I should say now, we're in way more programming there, have expanded greatly. There's a lot of diversity in what is being offered within the district and charter spaces. And so we're just really excited to be talking today about both what is available in the space, but also how do you help know what your child needs, and how do you advocate for your child to get what they need? As a mom of 3 kiddos here in the district, 2 who have graduated, that one that's still here, all very different learners with very different needs. And so thinking about the individual path of each of our children, how do we place them in the right place to help them have optimal success as they move along? We have a couple of panelists who are not here yet, but we're going to get going and hope they join us. I'd like to invite those of you who are here. I will call you by name to give us your name, your role, and just a little bit about yourself. And we'll start with Barbara Sabadini.
Hi, everybody. I am Barbara Sabadini, and I work for Sylvan Learning and have for the past 16 years, really long time. But before that, I taught middle school in inner city Oakland and San Francisco. So I have been in schools for 25 years or so, 24 years or so. And then before that, I was in education. I was in education as a school person, a kid, a student. So I'm excited to be here, and I've known Natalie for a good chunk of time, and she's fantastic. So I think we'll have a fun time today.
Thank you. Allison Huey, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Huey, and I have the great pleasure of serving as the Director of College and Career for West Contra Costa Unified School District. I'm also a Richmond resident and a proud WCCUSD parent of 2 kiddos at Washington Elementary.
Very nice, thank you. And Marin Trujillo.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marin Trujillo. I'm the Director for Student Recruitment and Retention in West Contra Costa Unified, graduate of Richmond High, class of 95. Before this role, I was a coordinator for family and community engagement, and I'm glad to be here today.
Beautiful. Thank you guys so much. As we think about the conversation, all of you have partnered with parents in lots of different capacities. You know the portfolio of schools really well from the work that you do. And so I'm inviting you to kind of take on all those various hats as we navigate through the conversation. Our first question is thinking about what should parents think about, or how can they figure out the elements of their child's personality, disposition, and learning style to have a sense of what is the best fit. I think about things like big schools versus small schools, K-8 versus middle. How do I come to look at my kiddo and think, these are things I should be paying attention to when I think about helping you choose the right school? What are things that come to mind for y'all? And someone can just dive in.
I'll say something. I think it's important for parents to walk in to the school with their child and just get a feeling for it. I like to look around and see what's on the wall, see if my child seems excited. By the time you get into school, you have some sense of who your child is, and would a small school fit a more quiet child better, or a child who's a different learner? Or do they need big activities, a lot of things going on? What kind of sense do you feel when you walk in with them? And what do they want? I would ask the child too. What are you looking for in your school? I want friends. I want a lot of friends. I want a few friends. Sit in on a class. I think that would be really helpful, just to see what kind of teachers are there and what the principal is like, and if the feeling is warm and welcoming. Very important.
Beautiful. Thank you. Marin, what's that make you think of?
I agree with Barbara, and I think it's important for parents to have an understanding of their child's learning styles. There's many ways to figure that out or have a grounding around that. I like to think that school is a place for everyone in public education. So thinking of, instead of choosing school, really understanding what is it that a child needs and looking for those qualities at that particular school to know what to lift up and say, oh, I'm going to check in more on the after school program, because it looks like that's where some of the kinesthetic energy my son really needs is going to be explored. And I do think from a consumer perspective, parents have the right to expect the school to be a welcoming, engaging environment. I'm going to quote you, Natalie, from years ago, where you said, and I've used this phrase before, a school should be a magnet first, And I agree, that's our responsibility. So if we assume that every school is doing the best they can to be a welcoming environment, the next question is, are there spaces for everyone in that community? Do you see your child's needs being seen at that school? And you do have the right to name it. And I would offer, even giving the opportunity to that leader to say, you know what, you're right, we're not paying attention to that. But since you brought it up, I'm glad you did. Let's see what we can do this year. I think in some ways that is part of creating the right community for you, not so much just buying the right product, but co-creating. And that's why I'm not a great fan of customer relations for public education. It's not a customer consumer relationship. This is a partnership between two adults and a group of adults around a child. It's more complicated than that. It's not a consumer transactional way. It's really holding hands together. So I think parents have the right to ask what they need to hold that hand. And I think schools have the right to hear that and to try to work it out together.
Oh, I love that. Beautiful. Allison, when you think in particular around our high school babies, you have many expertises about high schools where you spend a lot of your time. High school is a big, complicated moment in a young person's life, both in like growth and development. How do you think parents should be talking in middle school with their high school or future high schoolers around best fit, choice, and type of setting they want to be in?
Absolutely. I think this is an area where parents are really critical at having those conversations. As you said, middle school is a great time, but honestly, it's all the time, right? As a parent, you know your student better than anyone else, and getting a sense of both what their interests are as well as their strengths and their weaknesses, right? We all have areas that we're really good at, and we all have areas where we'd like to grow. And so when you're looking at the different opportunities for your student and where he or she may or they may best fit in, you're going to want to consider all three of those areas. What's my child interested in? Are there programs here that can help indulge those interests and grow those interests? And also, does my student need support in a particular area? What is offered in these different environments and through these different options that are going to be able to help support my student?
Beautiful, thank you. And thinking around this wonderful tension, often when we think around choosing the right school, we go to test scores back when we had academic data, and people would look at the great school score, and if the school was in the green, you would choose it. But there's this tension we hear with families around both the academic prowess of a school as measured in the very narrow lens of academic testing and all of the other support structures around a child. When we think around best fit for a child, how do we balance or weigh those kind of competing interests around potential academic excellence, although we could measure lots of different ways, and or needs for other things, counseling, enrichment, after-school programming, athletics, arts, all the things? How do we help coach families into balancing or considering both of those factors in choosing a school? What should outweigh what, or how do we think about it?
Again, personally, I think it really has to do with your child. If your child is very, very academic, and that's where they want to look, I would look for those test scores. Yes, there's not a lot of test scores happening right now, but you can get a sense from visiting the school, the quality of the work on the walls, talking to the principal, talking to the teachers there, talking to other parents, that sort of thing. If you have a child who is a really big kinesthetic learner, you got to find where is that choice school that has a lot of activities where they can do something physically, where they can, be on the basketball team, whatever it is. If they're a really artistic child, maybe a charter school that has an emphasis in the arts might be great for them. There's many, it's all about really, in my opinion, knowing who your child is and really being able to hammer in and feeling empowered to ask the questions, not just of the staff and the principal, but other parents in the community about what do you like? What does your child enjoy about this school? And then hopefully choosing through that.
Thank you.
Natalie, I think Marin said something a little bit earlier that reminded me, that when he said this isn't a consumer experience, what you see on the state dashboard is like you said, it's a snapshot of some very particular measures, and it doesn't communicate the whole experience of a school or a school community. And so I really like Barbara's suggestion to like talk to other members of the school community. I know as a parent, that's what I do, right? I talk to my friends who have students attending those schools and families. I ask them about their students' experience. And then Marin mentioned that it's a partnership. And so again, as a parent, like I'm looking at my student school experience as kind of a choose your own adventure, right? Like we get to craft, and as parents who are part of this partnership, we actually have a big role in crafting our students' experience. So making sure that your student is engaged, is taking advantage of the clubs, the college and career pathway programs, making sure that they are going to the college center and engaging with our on-campus college counselors. All of these resources are there, but it takes the student walking in and getting connected, right? And putting themselves out there and joining a band or trying out for the cheerleading squad. Those experiences happen when you participate.
Allison, I have a follow-up question for you. Can you just give us a voiceover on the Pathways program? If you don't have a high schooler yet, you may not know that we have an amazing set of programming within our district. But I'd love for you to just give us a voiceover and a walkthrough on what that is and how it looks different site to site.
I would love to. So what West Contra Costa Unified has been participating in college and career pathways, which is a state term for a set of coursework. It's a sequence of coursework that allows students to gain skills and knowledge in a certain industry sector for about 20 years here in the state of California. The state of California has identified 15 different industry sectors as being both high need, high wage for the state of California. And so they've provided quite a bit of funding to school districts to take advantage and grow these college and career pathways that assist students in entering into these high need, high wage fields. In West Contra Costa Unified, we have 18 different college and career pathway programs at our high schools. And with our open enrollment policy across the district, that means that, you know, if you're a student at Pinole Middle School, yes, your school of residence for high school is Pinole Valley High, where we have a health pathway, we have a law and justice pathway, but you don't have to choose Pinole Valley High School. Pinole Valley High School also has the International Baccalaureate program, which is one of our academic pathways. If you're a student who really likes to work with their hands, you might really be interested in the welding program at John F. Kennedy High School, which is the only welding program in our area. And you would be able to go to our transfer office and request a transfer based on a program. And you could join the welding program at Kennedy High and leave the program with the skills needed to be able to sit for the entrance exam for one of our welding unions.
That is amazing. There's a big thing I learned as my kids have gotten older is one, the diversity in the academies, but two, that there is an option for preferential transfer for academies, which are things we don't always think about when we're thinking about navigating choice. I want to pause for a minute and just go ahead. Sorry.
Oh.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to mention, we also have a lot of college and career options at our middle schools as well. So many of our middle school students get a first taste of the college and career pathways via career elective wheel courses at our middle schools, as well as our Project Lead the Way science courses at our middle schools.
I'm learning new things every minute I'm talking to you. This is very exciting. I just wanted to pause and welcome Larisha Martin to the panel. She is our Chief Academic Officer and some other titles I'm going to have her tell you because she's a woman who wears about 1,000 hats right now. We are very excited to have her join us here in West Contra Costa Unified this year, bringing a vision and a passion for data and accountability and thoughtfulness and high standards for all kids. And so I want to welcome you, let you say hello and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here. I am excited to see Dr. Allison Huey, Mr. Marin Trujillo. Just excited that my staff is here. Thank you guys, Go Public Schools, for hosting this event. It's so important that West Contra Costa gets information out to our families about our schools. You know, advertising and promoting is the only way that our families will really get to know who we are as West Contra Costa. And just even thinking about us and in terms of just expanding the amazing programs that Dr. Huey already mentioned. We're even looking at how do we expand that even further for our students and families, and just make the enrollment process smoother for our families, and even our transfer process. So my name is Larisha Martin. I am the Chief Academic Officer, Associate Superintendent, but I also hold many parts of operations as well, which includes enrollment and safety, social emotional learning. So excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This brings us right to Marin. Larisha shared with me some new thinking around the transfer office and the choice process for families. West Contra Costa is technically an open enrollment district, but in the past that meant you were enrolled in your home school of residence based on your address, and then had a small window of opportunity to request a transfer. I'd love to know and to have you share out like current thinking on where that's evolving to. So what is kind of already in place? I also would love to have you share more about the TK expansion. We know at the state level, TKs were expanded, which is very exciting for many families. So maybe give some voiceover on who does that include and what does that look like? I know things are still in the works because it is very new information. But with that in mind, we'd love to hear more about how do families navigate as they've thought about and discerned the right choice for their child? How do they actually advocate for that transition?
Great. So help me if I don't answer both questions in there. So the way in which someone raises their hand and says, hey, I think I want to go to a different school, used to be done through a paper application that you have to complete, bring to the transfer office or mail. You could try to email it, and then you have to attach proof of residency just to confirm where you currently live and just make sure that that we had all the right information. As I understood, I recently took over that department, had a lot of pain around it. People didn't know what happened to their application because it's either a yes or silence, right? If it's a no, you don't hear no every day because it's a no, not right now. So one of the immediate things that we've done is we've transitioned the form to an electronic form that will be turned on first thing Monday, whatever, Tuesday, February 1st, I think that's the first day. And that form does two things for us. One, makes it much easier for parents to let us know that they want to request a transfer for the next academic year. It also allows us to prevent all this back and forth with, oh, thank you, mom or dad, for submitting your form, but you forgot this part. And it will allow us to plan better, right? So if we see for some reason that Obama has, you know, I'm just hypothetically 50 kids who want to move to Obama, and we want to create space for that, then we're going to know that way sooner and let families know earlier. In general, the way the process works is that we take all the applications, and it's not a first come, first serve. There's a randomized sort of waiting list process that happens. And it used to take, my hope is that by May at the latest, families will know if yes, they are approved for their transfer or they are on the waiting list. So that's one of the changes that's happening. We're very excited about that. It's a small one, but I think it makes the process bigger and easier rather. The other thing, and Dr. Hugh was addressing it, is that in the application, if your choice, your reason for transferring is for a program preference, all of the academies that Dr. Hugh listed are now in the form. So you could say, I want to go to Richmond High specifically because of, I don't know them by heart, the Law Academy. I'm going to make one. I think there's one there, right? For that reason. Now we know that we know two things. You want to transfer, and we know why you want to transfer. And then this information will be shared with Dr. Hugh, et cetera, to see can that be accommodated. The process for transfers is February 1st to the, I'm looking at my calendar here, till the end of February. February 28th is the official sort of on-time enrollment period. Okay. So that's, and as I say that, that's, we'll see what that means now that we have an electronic form, because we should be able to answer things faster now. But we consider as of right now an application submitted March 1st as late, which means that you should not expect to get a response by May. My hope is that regardless of when you submit it, I mean, not the day before the last day of May, but suppose if you do it maybe by mid-March, then we will still be able to tell you yes or you're on a waiting list. That's does that answer the question around
Yeah,
the
beautiful.
transfer? Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And then I think your question around TK. So several things we can say about TK. It's a celebration, phenomenal that we can offer TK at more sites in our community. Another thing it's important for everyone to know that TK is available in many of our schools. And if I could show a map of our district, we are pretty well covered. There is a TK classroom for you if you want it. But we also, in most parts of the school district, specifically in the areas where the whole genesis of TK was to create access for families, like in the Richmond San Paulo area, we're well covered there. We work very closely with some data from our demographers, part science, part magic in there. We kind of guess how many kids are going to be here next year. And we've identified 3 areas that we needed to add more classrooms. Some place in the Pinot area, there seems to be a jump in number of students. We have seen over the last few years a growing group in El Cerrito area. So we saw the need to add another class there. So we've added a new location at Collins Elementary, a new location at Stewart, and a new location at Madera.
Nice.
That is adding, that brings our total number to 18 TK sites and with a total of 20 classrooms, because some of the sites have more than one. So it's very exciting. We are going to push out. We're going to create a landing. This is still in the works. We're in the landing page just for TK. Perhaps the biggest confusion is how old do you have to be?
Yes.
So it's you have to be 5 in between September 1st and February 2nd. So you can be 4, but turn 5 in between that time. So that takes a little bit of backwards mapping for people. Like, wait, so if I was born in March, where does that put me? It depends on the year, right? So we have in the TK listings, and I'll link them on the chat right now. We give you a little breakdown of what year would your child have been born to meet the criteria for next year.
Gotcha.
The other very exciting thing is that the age span keeps getting larger, meaning that at some point by 2025, you can be 4 years old
Gotcha.
by September 1st. And so that increases the number of children, and younger children can join TK. So that's being done in stages. It's also important to know that some districts and maybe some charters around have slightly different age ranges because we have decided on the suggested states ranges. Definitely, I want to acknowledge that there might be some schools that are going a little bit farther than that, but that's what we're doing given the data that we have, the projections that we've seen. We think it's the right choice. The other very exciting thing about TK is that TK teachers get an aide. The requirement is a ratio of 1 to 12. So not only in a TK do you have that teacher like a typical kinder class, but you have an aide also supporting, and that's I think sets it up for success and growing. And the data shows that we need to keep growing. So we'll have different problems to deal with, which are space. How do we keep adding classrooms at some areas, especially in the areas that are really growing? They may be lacking space right now. So these are no easy solutions, but challenges that we're aware of now, and that we're thinking about them now already for 23, 24, 25. And I'll put the directory on the chat.
Thank you. Seems like serving more babies is a good problem to have.
Absolutely.
Just figuring out how to make it work within our system for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm going to ask folks to kind of put on their hats and thinking around a parent walking through this moment. So Allison, we have a question for you that I'm going to weave into this. One is like how you chose Washington for your own family and what are the things that speak to you. But I want to nest in that a more broad question around when we think about multiple kids in a family that are very different, Having 3 children has very much humbled me. My children are very different in lots of different ways. Should they be in the same school? Should you prioritize finding the right fit for each of your kids? It might mean different schools. And what's the trade-off around commuting, moving them around, being parts of different communities? We get asked often by families like, I know my one child needs this, so then do they all get pulled to that school, which they don't necessarily all need? So in thinking around just like walking for a moment, Larissa, I know you have kiddos, like what does it mean to think about meeting the divergent needs of our children within the same family or potentially cousins and siblings together? And then Allison, for you specifically, tell us a little more about Washington Elementary and like what led you to that choice school.
Yeah, I'd love to start by saying like how thrilled I am to be part of the Washington community. It was really important for me when looking at elementary schools as a parent to find an elementary school that had a bilingual program. I really want to ensure that my students are global citizens. It's really important for me that my students are multilingual and multiliterate. So Washington has a Spanish immersion, dual language immersion program. And it's been really fantastic. And talking about like the divergent needs of learners, like honestly, it was tough for my oldest student. He just wasn't passionate about learning a new language. But now that he's a 6th grader, like he's fluent. He loves it. He won't tell you that he does, but he does. And then my youngest, who's a chatterbox social butterfly, loves learning languages. And our experience with both kids has really just been wonderful. We love the small community. We love that it's really diverse and that, the multilingual and multi-language learning aspect of the school has really created it's like a small UN of children and families. So it's just been a wonderful experience for us.
Wonderful. Larissa, how do you think about meeting multiple needs of different children in the same family while trying to minimize complications, logistics, and other pieces?
I mean, I would say for me, we want what we're thinking about now is even our areas within West Contra Costa and how are we providing multiple different opportunities for students by different pathways in a particular area, providing different CTE programs, ensuring that we have TK offerings, ensuring that we have after school programs, ensuring that we have social emotional supports but variety within that, right? We don't want schools that are all exactly the same. We want schools to have their own individual flavor and feel, but we want to ensure that areas within West Contra Costa have different offerings. So we don't necessarily have parents commuting from one end of West Contra Costa to another end of West Contra Costa to get to a school because it has particular offerings that they want. However, I think the beauty of being an open enrollment district is that you can make that choice if that's what you so choose. And so for me as a parent, for me, it was really around location, the offerings and after school from my daughter. It was really important for me to ensure that she had enrichment classes that really met her needs. And so I think as a parent, you have to think about those things, the after school programs, the enrichment classes, the arts, because those are all important aspects of a child's education. And so I think for us, we're trying to ensure that all of our schools within our different areas have that. That even played a part in how we are looking at TK, just making sure that we have those offerings within particular areas and that parents are not having to cross from one community all the way to another to get to a program or to a TK class or a CTE program or a pathway. But again, the beauty is if you want law, you can actually go and get law and transfer and receive that. And so I think it's important for a parent to know exactly what it is, because you might also want a DLI program, which Dr. Huey has chosen, right? And so that's also an option. So also, how do we ensure that we have different language programs, IB programs, how do we have those across the district so that parents can make those choices and what's best for their child? And so really streamlining the transfer process was really a key factor in this as well, to make sure that parents can decide if they want to go somewhere else outside of their traditional pathway, from one school to another, because that's in their area.
It's amazing because it is quite a distance end to end in our district. I live in El Sobrante now, right near De Anza, and even just going to El Cerrito to my sister's house, it can be 30 minutes just trying to get across town. And technically I'm almost in the same city. So I appreciate trying to at least synchronize hubs of services you can stay within your locality. Barbara, I'm kicked to you for a minute. Full disclosure, Barbara and I worked together at Sylvan many, many, many moons ago, and often saw families in kind of the throes of not experiencing success for their children, and then thinking around pivots they were making to meet their kids' needs. When you think around, you've had thousands of those conversations over the course of your career. What is the coaching you give a family as they're thinking around trying to find success or fit for their child in those moments?
It so depends on the child. I mean, at Sylvan too, we'd like to try to integrate the school as much as possible with what we're doing. So I encourage the parent to do the same and really talk to the teacher and have regular communication. I try to figure out, at what point in the child's career did they get behind? There's so many points and so many reasons why a child could have gotten behind. And then as we try to remediate, it's kind of a holistic program, right? Do we just focus on academics, or, as many people have said, what does the child love? So let's integrate that art. Let's integrate some sports too. Let's make this a holistic experience while we're building those reading or those math skills. So parents often will be distressed at the school, distressed about the child's teacher, upset that there was a sub in the classroom for a year. There's all sorts of things that are happening, particularly now, that are very difficult for parents and kids to navigate through. So it's for me, and I work with school districts all over the Bay Area and talking to parents as I have, it's trying to work as a community and as a partnership all together and say, we're all really just trying to do the best that we can. How can we all have a similar conversation about how to best make this appropriate for the child and how to really kind of boost them and foster them? Because, coming from where I taught in inner city San Francisco near Bayview, Hunters Point, and in Oakland as well, I never saw a kid that had an issue behaviorally that wasn't in some ways related to being behind, right? So let's figure out why the kid is so behind, then work to remediate that, and then integrate the whole school as a whole. And blaming never helps. A lot of times parents want somebody to blame. Sometimes it's the school, sometimes it's the teacher, sometimes it's their ex-husband or their ex-wife or whatever. But it's really important just to focus on the child. So that's what we try to do. And I firmly believe, because I have an art background too, that we get kids to do things they love in addition to academics. I think that helps the academic piece. So it's encouraging for me to really hear that there's so many different programs through these schools and the pathways in the high schools. I think that really, really focuses on what is key for a child and gets them engaged and interested. Because sometimes kids are turned off of school. How do we turn them back on? Sometimes just doing math over and over and over is not going to turn them back on. Sometimes playing basketball or being part of the chess club or something, whatever it is, turns them back onto school. So it's about being a partnership with the school and the principal and the teachers to really get on board together collectively and figure out what turns them back on. And then we help to remediate as much as we can.
In thinking about this idea of wrapping around a child, we know that the needs often include academics, absolutely, but are beyond it. So for Allison and Larisha to start in thinking around, I know for me, a thing I love about the idea of academies and pathways is smaller learning communities, more opportunity for mentorship and cohort work. Larisha, you and I talked a lot about what actually are full service community schools. What do they really look like? What is MTSS and what does it look like? So in thinking about both what exists and then what is like possible, what we want to be true. And Larisha, for you, what you're hoping to bring as you continue to bring your vision to our district. I'd love both of you to speak to like what is already happening around that wraparound idea that academics, I think, are the root of behavior often, but also are solved not always through academic interventions, like Barbara said. So what you're thinking around what that looks like in our schools currently, and what we hope to be true.
So currently we have many programs within our schools where principals are contracting out either through BACR or community partners to provide intervention and supports for students. Very similar to, if you had a Sylvan on your campus, right? So we have intervention programs for students, social emotional supports for students. Many of our high schools do have health centers as well. But I think what we're also thinking about, we're getting ready to currently write a community schools grant because at the end of the day, you have to have some internal and district-wide supports around community schools and student services. And then oftentimes when we have a variety of partners, we have to make sure that we're all aligned to the same vision and that we're moving in the same direction and that all of our schools have services and support. So what we're still finding is that some schools have multiple opportunities for students to get social emotional support and then some do not. And so that is not equitable in itself, right? And so we're thinking about how do we provide those services at the district level that can go out to school sites and really support the partners that are also at the school site. Because partners also want to know, how do we best support the school district? And who is our point person to really help us support the district and our students who might be struggling or in need? And often we don't have that point person. So what we're really trying to do now with the climate department is really build out. We've just hired 3 social workers. There was one already. And that's, sort of bringing that back to central office, bringing social workers centrally so that social workers can go out and support our community school managers with MTSS strategies. What are our tier 1 supports for our students at school? What are our tier 2, and what are our tier 3 supports for our students? And then how do we also then at the central level ensure that we're supporting in all of those areas? Because every student, we want to make sure that we have a common language at tier 1, that we offer the same thing. So for example, we purchased social emotional learning curriculum for all of our schools. That's tier 1, but you are still going to have some students who need extra support from either counselors, social workers, community-based partners. And so what is that, or even access to a health center? So what does that look like? And how do we make sure that every school has some aspect of those opportunities for families and students, and that families know that this is available to them and they can access that? So the point of really building out the social workers and central office climate department is really to help schools have tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 in place, and also support the community school managers. That we have 20 community school managers now, or directors now, but they also need support and guidance as well. And the partners, we're partnering, and we just need to get more focused around what do we have at every single school and what are we on every single student and family. And families want to know too, if their child is coming in and they're struggling, they want to know what are the supports at this school. And let's say you leave that school and you go to another school, you should have some similarities around supports and services that you're offering students. So I think this is really us trying to get aligned on what we offer at every single school. And I think making sure that we have social workers at the central office is a key factor in that. And also we're getting ready to do, once the department's built up a little bit, we are going to be doing an audit of all of our resources at every single school, and then really trying to realign. And we're currently, like I said, getting ready to write the community schools grant to try and get more funds to build out strong community schools so that we can actually have community school directors at every single school. We don't want them at 20 schools. We really want community school directors at every single school in the district that can help and support with the wraparound services that our families and our students need. So
it's beautiful. Thank you. It's nice to see just a really clear vision on what we're driving towards. There isn't a school I've ever worked at, been to, visited that does not need someone that is holding this part for young people. Education cannot happen without the support of the wraparound. And so the idea of it becoming a non-negotiable for all of our schools is just really inspiring to me as someone who has led and taught in them. I would have loved to have had it back in my day. And so I appreciate that. Allison, for you,
It is definitely a work in progress.
You know,
I
the
was
world's
just
a work
saying,
in progress.
definitely a work in progress. Right. Definitely a work in progress.
I think there's something about like manifesting it once we say it. So at least if we put like the stake in the ground of what we want to be true, we begin actually working towards it. It's easier than not even being sure where you're going. It's like trying to go on a road trip with putting nothing in your GPS. You have to actually put something in there to try and get there. So I just appreciate that for locking it in as a core value. Feels important. Allison, for you at the Academy, thinking around the opportunity for wraparound support for our high schoolers, how does that look for you?
Yeah, so you mentioned that one of the things that families may be looking for is support for their students. And one of the best ways that you can do that is making sure your student is connected and is engaged within the school. And selecting a college and career pathway program is one of the best ways that you can do that for your high schoolers. They essentially create small learning communities. Earlier, we heard Barbara talking about, about families considering whether their child will be okay in a larger school or in a smaller school. Even our biggest high schools have opportunities for children to find small learning communities by selecting into different program options. So if your student really wants to dig into academics, they may choose the International Baccalaureate program at Pinole Valley High. If your student really, really wants to learn about the medical field, they may join one of our many health academies throughout the district. If you're interested in which pathways are offered at which schools, you can go to our College and Career Pathways website on the district website. You can see firsthand student testimonials. You can see a list of all of the pathways offered throughout the different schools, but pathways are a great way. In our pathways that are formulated as academies, students actually travel through their core classes as a cohort. And so they really get to know each other in their grade level. They become kind of a team, right? That's focused around that industry sector that they're learning about and through. And the academics are actually integrated with the industry sector. So if I am in the engineering pathway, even in my English class, we might be reading selections of novels that really have students thinking through engineering problems, which is really exciting. So kids get these integrated academics that, as Barbara said, no student wants to sit through the same old math class over and over again. But when we can contextualize math and offer like geometry for construction, then it makes the math real. It makes the content connected to student interest, and it helps to provide that extra bit of support and engagement for our students.
I love it. Thank you.
Also, the pathway teachers really get to know the kids because they're cohorted, right? So it helps to create that small learning community where you have a group of adults that are really bonded and come together to support their students. It really becomes a family.
I love it much. We have a group of teachers we have a chance to work with periodically, and hearing their connection to students. They're in one of the law academies. It just is different then if you just see babies coming through your room really quickly, there's an ownership for their success that is really powerful to me. Marin, a question for you. I heard from everyone this desire, this best practice of look at a school, form the partnership, get to know each other. In the COVID world, as a parent, how do I do that? How do I get to visit a school site? How do I get to talk to people? We know this is a weird moment, and yet your window opens for transfers in just in a week or so. How do I gain the information that will help me make an informed choice?
It's a very good question. I don't have a clear answer for you because it's difficult to express everything that a school is. And that in itself requires time and focus to do either a video, and one would argue that a video wouldn't be enough, or even to schedule one-on-ones when we are experiencing a staff shortage. However, I would say, and I'll say this publicly, that if you reach out to a school to want to have a conversation with that principal to understand better, that's a great start. And if for some reason a site doesn't pay attention to you, that matters to me, and I would want to know right away. Because we should be responding to our requests. And I think every leader wants to connect with families and start at least with a one-on-one conversation to understand. This is not to not answer the question, but I think just like when you join a team and you join a school, you make it your own by being part of that community. So I perhaps have a slightly different take in that wherever you are, that's where you belong in one way, and you get the right to ask for what you need in that space, but there has to be communication. And so I definitely would want to hear if a family tried to reach out and they got no response, that's not okay. And because we understand that we need to be receptive and accessible, and that you're also busy and we need to make it as easy as possible. But in a non-COVID world, I would be talking to you about Saturday tours and drop-off times and classroom visits, and maybe even challenging schools to show off week, and invite families to want to come in. That's not possible this year in that way. But I would also say that any family that wants to have a conversation with a site leader about coming and what it's like should be able to give them a few days to respond, but they should be able to follow up. And if they don't, I would want to hear that and help facilitate that conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There are on the Education Fair website a good handful of kind of 2 pages on a lot of our schools that last year shared them with us. So if you're looking at a school and want to get like a snapshot of what they're all about, they are on the resource page on that website. In the chat has been going a conversation that we're not going to take on the specifics of, but it raises the general question. I'm not sure who would know, and maybe it's no one on this panel, around what role do IEPs play in school options or school choice? So if my IEP is at a certain school, is the process different for me to have an IEP transfer if I believe that there are better services or more aligned services somewhere else? Or is it the same? And then once I move, then my IEP gets adopted by the new school. Maybe Alicia will start with you, or Maria, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think I can take part of that question. Okay. So if you're wanting to move to a school site and you have an IEP, the transfer form will ask if you have an IEP, and we'll ask you, yes, no, do you have an IEP? And then we'll ask you what type of, what more do you know about that IEP? Is it RSP? Is it, and there's all these 3-letter acronyms that we have. Sometimes parents are not sure which one it is, but just saying, yes, they're special ed, they have an IEP, begins a conversation with the special ed department. Okay. There might be a spot open in 2nd grade at the school that the family wants to go, and their child is in 2nd grade. But the IEP services provided and that are required are not fully possible at that site. So that would begin a conversation with the parent that it could work at this site, but you wouldn't be able to get X at the site, and we wouldn't be able to offer it, or we can make this other accommodation. Would you still be interested in that transfer? And if special ed and that family can make it work, then we get the signal to go ahead and approve the transfer, and we move forward. If the child is in the new terminology MMSN and severely handicapped, as some people might remember it, those always go immediately to special ed, and they negotiate that part. But in general, the moment you say that there's a special ed designation for your child, we immediately involve the special ed department, because we want the move to work for everyone, right? So we need to have a conversation. Once in a while, they're not possible because the changes to the IEP would be too significant, and that school that you want to go to doesn't work, but maybe there's another school, and maybe that school would work. So that's part of the answer to that conversation. So yeah.
That's a great answer. To check my understanding, because my last time working in a district was in Oakland, and in Oakland, there were a lot of hubbed services. So like my school was the hub for all students who were visually impaired. And they all came to my school. And so if that was your primary identification, you didn't really have a lot of choices. We had all the services and staff that were trained for it. Is West Contra Costa similar that for those kind of unique designations, there is hubbing in that you won't have those services everywhere?
Yeah, I can't fully answer that, Malaysia. In general, like hearing impaired, visually impaired, there are hubs for that. We also know that special ed is working really hard to increase access as well, right? So that it can be as much. But to be strategic, sometimes you're right. There are schools that may have a special ed preschool program, but this other school doesn't have it. So if it's too far away, we may not have an option for you, but we think this school would be the right space. If it's RSP, that's a universal service that every school should be able to provide. It's important to say that no, being special ed does not prevent a family from moving from one school to the other. They have a legal right to do that. And our responsibility is to see we can make it work and not to create any type of inequity by saying, well, no, you're special ed, you cannot move. Our protocol is you have a right, we will honor it. And that includes a conversation with the special ed department to make sure that it works for everyone. That happens incidentally with the virtual academy. If you're special ed and you would like to join the virtual academy, and there's a conversation about what can be expected, would this medium work for your child given their special learning needs? And sometimes it does not work. And that's the conversation that we have with the family. I'm complete.
Thank you. Also for you, Marin, is a question in the chat around, should you apply for transfers to multiple sites? So if I'm saying, I do not want to be at my homeschool, I know that for sure, and I'm okay with a couple different schools, how do I communicate that in the transfer process?
Perfect. Love that question. And then next Saturday, I should be able, I'll host a virtual booth and I'll have the form ready to show people. But in the form, we ask you for your first choice and second choice. That's as much as we can handle, guys. You know, if you tell me, you know, your top 5 choices, it gets a little bit out of control. But we always ask you for what is your first choice and what is your second choice. And the people in the transfer office work really hard to try to accommodate it. We want to make it work for everyone. I want to say that. For us, if you are willing, and I know some of the questions are around that might be coming up around distance, but if you live in Hercules and you feel that a school in El Cerrito is the best choice for you because that's on your way to work or you heard some great things, and you can commit to bringing your child to school every day on time and all those things, and there's room, we want to make that work for you. No problem at all. It's only one transfer a year. It would be too disruptive, one for the child's education, to move a child, every other time. And so we only offer one transfer a year, and that's the transfer. And if the fitting doesn't work well, you could always choose to go back to your home school if there's still room. Otherwise, you have to stay there. You could always apply the next year for another option. But yeah, that's the way we wanted to ensure accessibility and make sure that families have choice. So you give us your first choice and second choice, and we'll try to accommodate it. If the school that, there are some schools that people want to go to, that a lot of people want to go to. And so that's why we always tell people this is our request for a transfer. And so submitting a transfer lets us know that you want to transfer. Do not make any plans until you get our approval. Sometimes people do that. They go, well, I called the school and they said they do have space. And what we've told frontline staff, and I've said it, but people still do things. I say, don't answer that question because it's just going to make everyone upset. One, there might be space, but that space is not for you. I have 5 kids on the waiting list over here, and they're first. But the secretary doesn't know that because, and they're busy. So I know people try to do their own investigation. I don't blame anyone from doing that. What do they say? Don't hate the player, hate the game. So I get it, do the hustle. But know that there is a process. It is a very equitable, blind, random sorting. And I will say this publicly, it doesn't matter who you know in the district. So if you try to send me an email and you copy the superintendent or the board member, with love, I say to you, it does not matter. We would just put you and recommend that you complete the form, and that's what we do. So don't try that. I get it. Connections and network is important, but there's just no way we could honor that process. Then people would jump the line all the time. So hope that helps.
It does. There's a theme in the Q&A section looking at our current financial situation. And the impact on programming people might be excited about. So if I'm choosing a school because they do have a program that feels really important to me and my child, we make that leap, and then there are funding cuts associated with it. So Larisha, I'm gonna kick this to you. And I know this is not your full department, but you live in it all the time. How are you thinking about the impact on those non-essential, which means not just classroom teacher programming, looking at where we're headed financially. This is a much bigger topic that we'll take on in another space, but what's your kind of voiceover on those scenarios in this moment?
We actually have not fully engaged yet on the cuts, given the state of the budget. We have started to have some of the conversations, so it's really early to really engage deeply. And I would definitely love for Robert McIntyre, who is our interim CBO, to come and support in this level of conversation. But I will say that we have had a conversation around priorities. And what are our priorities as a district? There is a previous strategic plan. We have a new superintendent who is in the process of engaging the community and the staff on his strategic plan. We do have an LCAP. We have LCAP goals. And so I think it's important for us as a central office cabinet to decide what are the non-negotiables given the LCAP and given our strategic priorities. And so that is where we are currently, just sort of thinking about what is a priority for us, and then how do we really focus on that? Also, how do we keep cuts away from schools so that programs at schools can continue to exist? So what are the things, often we say cut at Central, but then what then ends up happening is that schools and community then say, oh, there's lack of support from Central, but then you cut Central, right? So we're also trying to figure out what is a priority at schools, and then what is a priority at central office. We also are very aware that we have a attendance and student retention challenge right now, definitely going to impact things because our enrollment in West Contra Costa has dropped. And it is not just West Contra Costa, there are districts across the state in California that the enrollment is decreasing. And so with that, with the decrease in enrollment means that you also have to change staffing allocations at schools. And then also means you probably need to change what staff looks like at central office. So we're already engaging in staffing and enrollment projections for next year, which will also have some implications on budget. We also have a lot of vacancies because many positions were not able to be filled because of the staffing shortage in California and across the state. And so we also are going to be looking at how do we make that reduction in staffing first based on vacancies before we move into cutting any type of programs that we know are essential for our students, our families, and our community. And we are really heavily writing a lot of grants. And so we just wrote a grant for professional development for teachers, which will help support. Martine, Director of Family Community Engagement, is currently getting ready to write the full service community school grant. I know Dr. Huey is writing grants all the time for college and career. So, the tricky part with grants is that you write the grants, and grants have a start and an end time. So we have to be careful with those as well. But we also are trying to figure out how do we write grants to offset some of the budget challenges we are going to be facing.
Thank you. And I think my takeaway is over the next few months, we'll see much more information rolling out as the budget process continues and things get more clear. I will say that West Contra Costa is not unlike many partners across the state and nation who are doing all of these same adjustments and permutations. As I continue to read what's happening in the bigger education space, this is not unique to our district, even though it feels very personal and localized to who we are as parents and investors in this process. It is unfortunately a national crisis that we're facing in the moment. And so I appreciate all that's being done. I think in general, the theme I'm seeing in the questions in chat is a request for transparency. So how can community members be at that table beside district leaders and just be informed and knowledgeable as we kind of move along? There is a request, and maybe Mighty Bell has found it, for the links to the strategic plan and the LCAP. For folks to be able to know where to find them on the website. So I'll let that dangle for folks to look at and think about. And one more question we've had is people really wanting, I'll start with you, Barbara, coaching you have for families, I'm like, how do they find their community in the school? It's kind of a weird thing to ask in many ways. Like it's about kids, but yet I think for families finding their kind of hub and network, and how do they get heard in the sea of need? What are things you've done to coach families in navigating and finding their voice in a world that has a million pressure points, right? Start with Barbara, and then we'll go to Allison and then to Larisha. No pressure.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. What I find so often is that by the time we see parents, they already have their niche in the schools. There's the coffee club in the morning where everybody's chatting together, or if they're in the ELAC community, they're talking amongst themselves. PTA, all of that. Some people do feel disenfranchised though, and uncomfortable in their school communities. And it's a kind of a gentle nudge to find like-minded parents and to actually participate. Some families are so incredibly busy, they don't have time. And that's what I've heard. We don't have time to participate in school activities, et cetera, et cetera. They have a lot of little ones at home. It's hard to do that. It's hard to access. And I've seen so many schools work so hard to do parent outreach and have family dinners and bring food in so that they can bring the whole families. It's that parents are really busy and schools are really, really trying. I don't have the answer. I mean, I know that schools try so hard to engage their parents, and sometimes that's the hardest thing. And as much as I can encourage parents to talk to other parents, sometimes they just don't have time. So I don't have the magic bullet on that one for sure.
Beautiful. Allison, do you have anything to add to that one, especially for our older kiddos? As a mom of high schoolers, the world feels a little different. So how do I step up and find my space?
I think it's tough. Barbara's telling the truth. Like, it can be really difficult. I know for me, like I work full time, and it's like I can't do stuff at school during the daytime like I might want to. But I think like just putting yourself out there and trying to attend the things that you can attend. It's okay to join PTA and only go to the Zoom meetings, and only go to the Zoom meetings on the months that you can attend, right? Don't think that you have to go every single coffee club. If you can show up to 2 coffee clubs a year, that's fine too. Any level of engagement is engagement, right? Like, so for me, like I joined the PTA. I don't make every meeting. I joined the garden club, which meets on the weekends, and we can bring the kids with us. So it's really like a family event. And then, I try and stay engaged with my kids' teachers as much as I can. And email and Class Dojo have been awesome ways to communicate frequently and clearly with the teachers in the school, even though I can't be there as much as I want to be.
Thank you. Larisha, we have a question from Molly in the chat that's just, how can parents help the district? How can they offer support in a tangible way in this wild world we're living in? What is the biggest need, and how can they be helpful and not like another thing that has to be supported and managed by the district? As a mom myself all the time, like I feel bad sitting on the sidelines when I want to get in and help the game. So what are things, the questions like fundraising efforts, volunteering, supporting morale, what would be helpful in this moment for families to support the district in all of our schools?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're currently putting out some information to families, because we just talked about it at the board meeting. We really want to champion for volunteers at schools. I think right now, given that we are seeing such a major staffing shortage, and there are families that we really need in our schools to support with yard supervision, helping with lunch supervision. Obviously, parents, who are not credentialed can't teach in a classroom, but just having that extra body in a classroom to really help a teacher. We are Martine Blake, and Marin is also going to be supporting just a little bit. There's going to be some information going out to ensure that we're doing a volunteer fingerprinting party again. And so we really want parents, even if it's not your child's school that needs the support, how can you even support at another school that might be in need? And then really helping other volunteers be really active in the school community so that we can have more adults around, given just sort of where we are with the staffing, which is a major challenge right now. I would also just add that there are tons of opportunities for parents, and I would love to see more parent representation at our MDAC meetings, our DLCAP meetings, our ASAP meetings. And then also, if you are a parent at a school, they have there's supposed to also be ASAT parent reps at schools as well. And so I would really love to see parents engage because at the last DLCAP meeting, we actually talked about the budget. Robert McIntyre presented on the budget and sort of where we are. And I think it would be really important to hear parent voices during those meetings to give us ideas and feedbacks on things that we can actually be doing. I often see, which I appreciate, that there are often I find that there are many of the same parents that are in those meetings, and I would love to have a broader representation of families in West Contra Costa so that we can really get the voices of all families to really help us through some of these challenges or even some of the data that we're presenting. Give us better ideas, tell us where we need to get better. I think we're receptive to feedback. We want to hear the feedback and we value family input. So, and Dr. Hurst is getting ready to also, the plan was to launch in January engagement in all the areas on his strategic plan and getting input around what families really believe is important to them. And so we've had to push that back because of all the COVID demands, but that is coming as well. And so we really want parents at the table to engage with us on the strategic plan and what are the priorities for you in the community.
Beautiful. I think there's definitely a positive response to what you're saying and a desire to hear from Martine Blake as she gets clear on the plan for how do people go in. I would love to just co-sign and double down on considering not volunteering at your own child's school, but other schools, both for your child to have space to be at school and have their own identity, but also your gifts and talents for all of us who want to volunteer can be spread across the district more equitably and within a more even distribution. When I led schools, it was great when I had folks come in who were not parents within the community. They have a different set of kind of engagement in the process. So I'll just say that as a co-signer on that idea of expand your wings and meet other schools. Also a chance to get to know other school campuses as you're exploring the many offerings. I want to thank so much our panelists for their time today. We know that we could talk about this for a long time, but thank you for spending part of your Saturday with us.